Greetings, everyone. This is Linda Talaferro, and it is, as I always say, on the first and third Tuesday, my favorite time of the month because it is Being Brown at Work Live. And as you can see, I have yet another new fabulous guest that I'm so excited to introduce this audience to because we're going to talk this session, this month, about something that we rarely talk about and that most of us are afraid to talk about, and that's money. But we know that money is a tool. And if you're like me, unfortunately, in the era I grew up with and the parents that I had, they didn't really have the knowledge or education to pass on to me. So I learned the hard way. But my daughter, who's younger and, and making her way through life, has done it the smarter way than I did. So I was so glad that I got introduced to Brian William Jones because he's going to educate us this month. So you really want to tune into this live on today and then catch it again in 2 weeks. But first, let me introduce you to this fabulous young man. Brandon William Jones is an entrepreneur, technology leader, investor, and a board director. Today, Brandon is the founder and CEO of Gravy, an education and private investment platform focused on building generational wealth through education, access, and community. Before founding Gravy, Brandon built a track record as a senior executive growing and scaling technology products into category leaders. Most recently, Brandon served as a vice president and head of global sales development at ServiceNow, leading a 400-person organization responsible for driving new business pipeline for a Fortune 500 company and one of the world's fastest growing enterprise software firms. Prior to joining ServiceNow, Brandon led the sales development organization for LinkedIn for North America, driving 65% of the new business across the company's talent, sales, and learning solutions business lines. Before his tenure at LinkedIn, Brandon spent nearly 7 years in several leadership roles at Google, including leadership roles on its commerce and virtual augmented reality teams and heading sales development for Google Cloud Americas during periods of substantial growth. Before Google, Brandon held several operational, strategy, and M&A roles at companies including Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Johnson and Johnson. Brandon is a board director and a finance committee chair for Scan Group, one of the largest Medicare Advantage plans in the country with over $5 billion in revenue and 300,000 members. Brandon also serves as the board director and finance committee chair for Scan Foundation. Brandon is an avid investor and actively promotes wealth creation. You notice the word we're using, wealth creation, through ownership in underrepresented communities. Brandon holds a BA in computer systems from Howard University. Go Bison, my daughter's a double Bison. An MBA from Harvard Business School. He has traveled to over 50 countries and lives in Washington, D.C. area with his wife, Charlotte, and 3 young kids. Welcome, Brandon, to Being Brown at Work Live. I'm so honored to have you here.
Thank you. First off, I just want to applaud you for creating this incredible platform. I think these conversations are so important and highlighting wealth, particularly at a time that we're in right now. And we can kind of get into why, there should be a sense of urgency around this wealth conversation today. But thank you for the full bio that you gave me.
Yes. Hey, well, you know what? I want to give flowers to people, when they deserve them and not after. I want to make sure you get your flowers because your experience, your background, how you've led across the tech and the financial industry needs to be applauded. And there's not a lot of people that look like us that have had that opportunity to do so. So I have no problem when there's reading bios like that. Absolutely no problem at all. And again, honored to have you. So as you mentioned, Brandon, and I know when we had our discovery call to really get prepared for the June session, we talked about the fact that most times people think of money or the need to have money is, okay, I'm going to have a savings account. Maybe where I work, I might understand or take the time to understand a 401k, maybe not. Or, it could be in a situation where, like I was growing up, It wasn't a topic of conversation because they just didn't have the knowledge or tools. But like you said, today, 2025, and I would say probably before this, it's critical to shift that mindset, right? To educate ourselves. So let's dig into the why. I mean, what is happening from your estimation, Brian, excuse me, Brandon, that really makes this a critical topic, wealth generation?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say, hello to the audience. It's a pleasure to be here, and spend time with you, kind of talking about this really, really important topic. And to your question, Linda, around why is it such an important topic, I would take a step back and really even kind of define what wealth is, right? And
Yes.
at a fundamental level, wealth, in my opinion, is health, of course, and we've all heard the statement, health is wealth. But also, wealth is really around, as a human, living a full life. And I think
Mm.
Freud has this phrase where he says, life is really about relationships and work at the end of the day, right? And so, if you're working, right, working on something that is meaningful, working on something that's impactful is a big part of being wealthy, right? Even if you're just going to work and we're not even having a wealth conversation around how you're investing, et cetera.
Yeah,
If you're
yeah.
going to a job that is stimulating you and allowing you to do your best work, that is a form of wealth. Health is a form of wealth
Oh,
as
I
well.
love that, Brian. I
Um,
love that, Brandon, because I'm sure as we even said the word wealth, people immediately went to dollars, they went to money. So I love how you're crafting the definition around wealth. I'm
yes.
sorry, keep going.
No, and the part that we'll dive into in this conversation, which is kind of the third piece of wealth, is freedom and control. Or in other
Ah.
words, detaching your time from your money. That is the definition of wealth.
Wow. Wait,
Create
wait, wait, pause. Okay, hold on. Okay, and just to get to you'll get to know me. When guests drop nuggets, I have to pause and have them repeat it because
just get
you just
warmed
said
up. Just
something.
get warmed up.
Yes, you just said something that I thought was, I mean, oh my God, it just had so much in it. Although detaching your time
From your money.
from money.
Yes. Yes.
Mm,
Most of us, let's be honest, right? As we kind of think about the audience here, many of the folks here obviously are underrepresented. And so, how we grow up, the environment where we're growing in, we don't have conversations around true wealth. What's the definition of wealth, right?
so, so, so
Having a good job, quote unquote, is the win. I would make the argument that, having a good job is the foundation for the win, which is detaching your time from your money. And so, I'd be non-realistic to say all of us, getting into a position where you're earning, a good salary is not that first step for many of us, but
right.
once we're there, I think a lot of us are happy with simply making good money, being a high earner. And we can kind of get into how that is far from enough. One, because of the way that our, capitalistic system in the US is set up, where high W-2 earners pay the highest tax rates, have the
Yeah.
least amount of freedom, and other things, And so this idea of building wealth is really around accumulating assets that appreciate in value or deliver cash flow outside of you spending, an hour for a
Mm.
for a wage or a year for a wage. That trading time for money piece is truly what our true north should be.
Oh my gosh. Brandon, that's everything. That's everything. Because I mean, late in life, I have begun, and I shared this with you a little bit when we met before this session to prepare. Late in life did exactly that entrepreneurship, right? And then, things that I'm acquiring. Actually, my daughter came home for Mother's Day and we're sitting on the front porch of the condo talking about, you know, she's introducing me to REITs. I pronounce it correctly, REITs, and the book I read. And she says, Mom, why don't you think about, which I would have never thought, buying a suite she said, you love sports. Why don't you buy a suite and then you can rent it out or lease it? I was like, I looked at her, I was like, ah, I, I mean, I love that idea. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Her at her age, I'm so happy for it. She's thinking about exactly what you're talking about, not trading time for money, but being creative and understanding, okay, what access can I acquire that then will build in value, grow in value, and have this, flow of money, building wealth over time. It's just a conversation. Like I said, my mom was born in 1928,
Mm,
right? Okay. And so her mentality was when Linda got the GM job out of college, oh my gosh, what you just said, oh, you got a good job.
right. You made
You
it.
got a good, yeah, you made it, right? I left that job in 3 years to go work for Boss. She lost her mind. She was like, nobody leaves leaves GM, right? But that's the mentality. To your point, I remember she would roll the toothpaste, Brian. I mean, that whole tube, you get every little inch out of it, right? Because it was a depression era she grew up in. So didn't have that knowledge to share. And that tends to be in the underrepresented communities. And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I want to break that,
Yeah.
right? I want to break that I won't I don't want to put any negative connotations on it because we did, when we know better, we do better,
Right.
right? And so
Exactly.
that's yeah, and that's what I love
And
having you on. So
and
go
to
ahead.
that point, it's not a bad thing. This is just the natural evolution of sophistication, right? We were playing checkers. It is a strong checker move to get a well-paying job, right? That puts you in a position to have kids, pay for your kids' college, buy that house. These are the things that are foundational for wealth building at what I would say is the chess level, right? But then
Yes.
now that we're there, it's all about, how do we play chess? And
There you
so
go.
some things that we're seeing right now in today's environment is, what used to be the security of a full-time job is starting to go away. And so if you're looking at the headlines, you're seeing a lot of layoffs, you're seeing AI disrupting,
Yep.
you're hearing CEOs say we're not hiring anymore, or attrition is our friend. That's what the JP Morgan CEO said. He was basically like, if people leave the team,
Wow.
good thing, right? Because now we're not going to hire and we're going to get more efficiencies with AI. And so what used to be, kind of that win, as your mom, kind of viewed it, it was a win at that time. But nowadays, the reality is we're forced to now think about how do
Yeah.
we build more of a foundation outside of that 9 to 5 job because that
Yes.
job is getting less and less secure every day.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that foundationally is the why to this conversation and the why in which we need to shift clearly. Are there any other aspects that you could add to that why so we can really, get people rooted in, okay, I've got to make a change here. Listen to Brandon and Linda, and I totally get it. The AI piece clearly, the
Right.
job market clearly. Is there any other
Yeah.
aspects that you would add to that, Brandon?
Listen, the well goes deep, but what I'll say is, when you think about the financial piece of wealth, it really boils down to ownership, right? So if you think about
Mm,
all the disparities that we see in the US and the world, I would argue literally all the disparities, whether it's healthcare disparities or education
yeah,
disparities or housing disparities, it all boils down to ownership or lack of ownership, right? So if
yeah,
you don't own your house, right, your landlord can kick you out, or the neighborhood can have gentrification take place, and all of a sudden you're being ushered out, right? Same is true with the ability to earn your own income, right? It's detaching you from, for example, we're seeing a lot, and I don't want to get political, but we're seeing a lot of rollback in DEI, right? And the
sure, yes,
hiring that was happening in that space. What do you do if you're now someone who, had that good job and now the companies are starting to, you know, um, do layoffs, and those layoffs are
yeah,
proportionally impacting folks that look like us. And so this idea of ownership, kind of getting back to, assets that increase in value, or deliver cash flow is really at the core of it all. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is, in your job, if you do all the right things that you're kind of advised to do, which is, hey, I have a 401k, or even maybe on top of that, I have a Roth IRA. Once you kind of get more sophisticated, you realize that there's a lot more that can be done that's a lot more effective and a lot more efficient.
yes,
And
yes,
without getting too deep into it, in many ways, those mechanisms are created for people that lack self-control or the discipline to save on their own. And yes,
there
there's
you are.
tax breaks, but there's many tax breaks that are accessible to folks along the way that are actually more advantageous if you have the right playbook, if you have the right blueprint that you're running versus kind of putting it away and letting it continue to accumulate
Yes,
for 30 plus years. They're both good, but they're different levels of good. And we'll get into,
of
I know
good.
in our next session, we'll kind of get into the how a little bit more.
Yes.
I just want to lay out that it's really about ownership, and it's really about opening up our eyes to understand that there's a lot more that we can do beyond the basics of 401ks, IRA, retirement savings accounts to really build wealth.
Right. And it's and like I mean, everyone that you're listening to, if you're listening to this on a replay or if you're here with us live, I mean, did you hear what Brandon just said? He didn't say those things were bad. So, I
Yeah.
mean, if you have them, he's not telling you, oh, go close. No, he's not saying those are bad. He's telling you that there's some additional tools of which you could do that could actually level you up
Yeah.
and really create a strong foundation of wealth for you that you can enjoy in the long term. So please note that because I don't want anybody saying, "Well, you guys told me to close my 401k." No, we didn't
We
say
can say that. Definitely didn't
we
say
didn't say
that.
we didn't say that at all. Didn't say that at all. And so, Brandon, yes, definitely ownership. We understand what's happening in the market, in the job market. We've got, technology. I mean, in this 2025, it'll be 2030. Things are continued. Something else other than AI is going to come around. So I'm sure, the things are going to continue to happen. Is there anything else that you said the well is deep? What else would you share,
I'm,
Brandon,
I'm
as
gonna
to,
keep it.
adding to the why?
No, I'm going to keep it super high level. The first thing I'll say is, look, we talked about different versions of wealth, right? And so, one, when it comes to the financial thing, is finding a job that, again, you feel engaged in, you feel like you're doing your best work, you're making your best contributions. That's a really important part, given that life, is 1/3 work or more. So that's number one. Ideally, though, if you get that job or you have that job, you're going for a job that also awards you equity, not just salary. And so I'll give you an
Mm,
example that I've experienced. So
yes.
prior to working in Silicon Valley, my first job in Silicon Valley was at Google. I had been an investment banker, right? And I was someone who is a super high earner, so to speak. Investment bankers are known for being paid highly, but what I came to realize later was that getting paid in salary, all salary, was not necessarily a good
Mm,
thing. Here's why.
hmm.
So for one, your salary is generally going to be taxed at, particularly if you're on the coasts, so East Coast or West Coast,
Yep.
at
Yep.
the highest federal tax rate, and then usually you're going to have a high state tax rate as well if you're in California and New York, for example. Then if you throw in, property taxes if you own a property and sales taxes, when you add it all up, you're basically looking at 50+% of what you're making
Yeah.
going back to Uncle Sam, right? And this is
Yep.
why so many people, even if you're saving 10, 15%, you're putting that away. But the reality is for a lot of people, you've earned a certain lifestyle as well, right? So you want to have, you want to take vacations, you want to,
Mhm.
eat in nice restaurants. Why wouldn't you, right? You've done the work, you've gotten it. But when it's all said and done, it's really, really hard to escape financial gravity. Meaning
Right.
your baseline is you're probably going to work until the retirement age or close to it, which again is not a bad thing if you find a career that you really like. That
Yeah.
being said, one of the things that I want to highlight is for me specifically, when I got this job at Google, 30% of my compensation was actually in Google stock, or
Ah,
more specifically restricted stock units, which is basically,
yes.
without getting too detailed, stock options means that you basically have the right to buy stocks at a low price, but you're actually having to pay for those shares. Restricted stock units, which is typical of Silicon Valley, is you're actually getting the full value of those shares. You don't have to pay anything for them, awarded to you. And so when they're awarded to you, they're taxed as regular income, but then they're still shares, like on the market. And ultimately, what I realized was for the 7 or so years I was at Google, the value of those shares that I was awarded as part of my compensation quadrupled, right?
Yes.
So if I had, $10,000 worth of shares, it was $40,000, that I had, and it was completely detached from me working for it. So this is like
Yes.
kind of the employee way of detaching your time from your money. Of course, I was contributing to the company because I was an employee at the company, but even if I left the company, those shares would still be mine. And largely, the gains of those shares are not necessarily based on my,
Exactly.
hour to hour, week to week,
Right.
40 hours a week plus, labor. So what I would say is finding a job that is engaging is really important, but it's also as important to make sure you have a job that is awarding you stock, and ideally stock at a good company. I was fortunate that, at Google,
Yes.
obviously, at that time,
Sure.
still even to this day, one of the hottest companies kind of in tech. So that was obviously a benefit that I enjoyed. However, this is the case for any company, right? You want to get paid in stock. And then we'll talk about, in our next kind of episode, how there's additional things that you can do that the wealthiest do to build wealth with the stock that you own, that you are awarded from your company without selling it. And that's an important thing that I want to unlock, because we just don't have these
Yes,
conversations. Many of us don't
we
talk
don't.
at all.
We don't, Brandon. And you had that in the tech industry, and I will tell you, I've been in manufacturing in the automotive space, my 40-year career, of which the majority of it was with publicly traded companies. So I had RSUs and PSUs. So RSUs are the restricted stock that Brandon's talking about. And then, of course, I had PSUs, performance based stock as well. And so he's absolutely correct
Changer.
about game changer, game changer. And that's why I tell my clients when they're getting offers and whatnot, as they always just look at the salary. And I said, no, you want to look at the compensation and benefit package. So what else are you getting in addition to that salary? Is there stock options and so forth? So what Brandon just shared with you, everyone, if you are getting restricted stock units, RSUs, you don't understand them, well, you want to reach out to Brandon at Gravy. For one, connect with him and let Brandon educate you, let him support you in that. But first up, at least go to your comp and ben person at your company and get some information, so that when you do connect with Brandon, he can read that and give you some advice on how to, because it is a total game changer. And
Absolutely.
especially if the company is sold. I mean, I was when the one I was in got sold, I was like, oh, so that's how that works. It was like, okay, yeah, it
Absolutely.
was pretty sweet. So that I'm glad you brought that up, Brandon, because we don't talk. One, we just don't know. I mean, it's not common, unfortunately, in our community for people like yourself or like myself to have these experiences of which we can then reach back, reach across, and share, which is why I'm so glad you do what you do. I'm glad you started your business, Gravy Wealth Management Company, because it takes persons like yourself who have lived it, right? Your education's stellar, of course, but you've also lived it and experienced it, and you've actionized these things, right? And so you know what you're talking about because you've done it. So, I mean, this is why this month is so critically important. A lot of you may be thinking, well, Linda, you mostly talk about careers. This is important, just like the gentleman said. If you have a job, understanding the job that you have, hopefully part of your wealth is that you enjoy it, that you're, motivated, inspired every day, and then understanding how that job, your career, can translate into wealth building. He just gave you a beautiful Benny here on restricted stocks, and there's going to be more
A lot
in a
more.
couple of weeks that he's going to share as well, right, Brandon?
Yeah, and look, what I can say is, to your point, I'm speaking from a position of somebody who's learned all these things on my own, and it's almost embarrassing to say, but it's true that as an investment banker who prided himself on, being financially sophisticated, that is a completely different skill set than, just not knowing what you don't know, right? And so I think
Right,
because we don't have
right.
these conversations, and Linda, I think it's great that you're creating this platform for people to kind of be exposed, which is always the first step, is being exposed.
Yes.
And for me, I felt so passionately about having these conversations that, it was important to me, at the point where I could financially, handle it, to switch gears and say, hey, look, I want to focus on high earners who are tethered again to the time for money trap, like myself, and I can relate to it. And what are all the things, the insights that I can deliver to them that have been, sourced from tens of thousands of hours with, kind of the wealthiest folks and the most sophisticated folks in terms of what they do. And that's what, Gravy is all about. It
That's
is
what
catered
Gravy does.
to
Yes.
the busy high earner who is on a tightrope balancing work, family, health, mental sanity, all
Mm,
these things. And they just don't have the bandwidth and capacity. They want to do it. And for many of us, generational wealth is our why, but oftentimes
yes.
caught up in, having to deliver at work, and, you got this performance review coming up and this big project, it often falls to the wayside. And so we exist to help bring expertise from people, who have been there and done that, helping to deliver clarity around what is the pathway that's
Mm,
best suited for individuals based on their temperament, kind of their DNA, There's a lot of things that can happen while you're in your job. So for example,
Yes.
many people could potentially pursue public speaking, right? Which is a way to augment
Yeah.
what you're doing in your day job, but still give you more security, because as you speak, you're building your personal brand.
Yes.
You're
Oh,
reinforcing, not necessarily bringing any risk, because it is related to your job and kind of what you do. So there's ways to approach it. Some people, we deal with people who want to buy businesses, and people who want to start their own businesses, but there's a whole other layer of the spectrum, which is what can you do in your current role, not only
yes,
from a
yes.
financial perspective, but from a multiple income stream perspective as well.
And I want to add to Brandon what you just said, because I want everybody to know that it is possible. I wish I knew Brandon Jones 20 years ago. I
Mhm.
swear I do, because I had that desire, but had no idea how to go about it.
Right.
But I was like you just said, Brandon, I was caught up in the, life, the marriage, kids. You
Yeah.
know, I went to grad school kind of late and got my MBA. A lot of things happening, and so didn't have the time, didn't have the time to invest, was so into the 9 to 5 trading time for, I was doing all of that. So I'm telling, but later in like this business, the T, the extra effort, my business, I started 8 years ago. I mean, now I'm 63, right? So I was in my mid to late 50s when I did this. And I can't tell you, and anyone that's listening to this and listening to Brandon, connect with him, because I'm telling you what I have experienced and benefited from doing this late in life, because I have a 9 to 5.
Mhm.
I have a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And when I got the new role that they searched and got and brought me on board, part of my contract was my business stays intact. I'm not closing my business. I'm not ending my podcast. And they supported that actually in my offer letter.
Mhm.
So I'm telling you all, listen to this young man. He knows, I'm a witness. He knows exactly what he's talking about and what is possible while you have your 9 to 5. Speaking, fabulous idea. I can't tell you that, and I met tons of young entrepreneurs, right? Most of the younger ones helped me do all the stuff behind the scenes of my business. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this tech is like too much. But they just they love me enough. It's like, Linda, I'll come over for 4 hours and sit and do it for you, no problem. And as I met them, some of them did exactly what Brand is talking about. It's public speaking.
Yeah.
While they were like, one was working at an electric company, 9 to 5, and she's off, and now she's got her own business as a public speaker, traveling around the world.
Yeah.
So, I can't implore enough, and we're gonna, oh my God, the 30 minutes just flies by on these. Every time I have these fabulous guests that I've been blessed to get connected with this year, but I can't say it enough. Please, if you even are like doing man, I need to think about it. Yes, you don't
Right.
just need to think about it, you need to act. And you want to DM, LinkedIn, however,
Hit me up on
connect.
LinkedIn for sure.
There we go. Catch Brandon Jones on LinkedIn, connect with him. Do not delay. You don't want to be 63 like me and then saying, I wish I had a. Okay? You do not want to be
You know what?
that.
You're not in the worst. I don't think a lot of people would be mad at doing what you're doing. Number one. So
Thank you. I appreciate you. I
let
appreciate
me
you.
say this. So Linda,
Yes.
this is what we do, and we cater to the busy, high earner professional who is looking for clarity, looking to take an intentional step, but just needs some structure, needs some accountability, needs some support. We are launching an ownership sprint on June 23rd that week, and it is for the busy professional. So it's Monday through Friday with a bonus day on Saturday, 2 hours. So 9 to 11 on PT, and then 12 to 2 on ET, where we basically have a theme for every day where we break down what are the tax breaks available to high earners. Then we have different visitors come in who have explored different pathways, from public speaking to advising boards to acquiring companies and everything in between. And we give folks an assessment to help find their ownership DNA, to understand what is the best pathway for them. And then we link them to the resources and the experts we have in our network to help them move forward. So if that's something that your audience would be interested
My goodness.
talk about a preferred situation, Linda, for your audience, but that's something I want to offer up for people who have the desire but don't have the time to kind of do all their work on their own.
Oh my gosh, sign up for that. If I wasn't going to be in Europe, I would sign up for that, because I want to get I'm on a paid board. I have a paid board seat. I want another one, right? Because I'm thinking like 5 to 8 years from now, I want to retire, but I still feel like I have a lot to give, right? And so I still want to be involved. And I wish I could come to that myself. Connect with Brandon on LinkedIn now so you can get the details on how to sign up, register, whatever you got to do for that event on June 23rd. That is, I mean, I don't even have words to describe that opportunity. So you don't want to miss it. Brandon, this was fabulous. Part one. Look, 2 weeks, you guys, same time, 2 weeks from now. He's going to give you a button. You're going to have your notes, that piece of paper or your phone, whatever you know, iPad, whatever you take your notes in. You want to have it because he's going to give you the how.
That's right.
What you need to do and how to do it. So you want to come back in 2 weeks. Brandon, I can't even express in words. What an honor. Thank you.
Is it a pleasure? Take care, everyone. We'll talk.